guys so much for having me. Presumably you've all seen an Olympics at some point, is that right? Summer Olympics, Winter Olympics, Winter Olympics, speed skating in the Winter Olympics, speed skating in the 2006 Winter Olympics. You guys watch me in the 2006 Winter Olympics? Nah, thanks, Mom. Back in the back. So Adam, I don't know where Adam is. Adam's still here? Back there. Okay. So one of your brothers here is an instructor at my gym, and this is always fun when people who know me in like my normal life now get to listen to me speak, because they're always like, I can't believe that guy could have done any of that stuff. It's absolutely insane. So Adam is like, if you want to know the real story of athletically what I'm like when I get in the gym now, I'm sure he'll be happy to fill you in. Probably shouting over the rooftops by the time I'm done. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm an Olympic gold, silver, and bronze medalist in the sport of long track speed skating. I got to get some other things, which I like to show off. I call this setting the stage. Makes me seem like a little bit bigger deal than I am. I know in this town you're a little bit, you're taking some chances, putting a picture of yourself with Clinton up there, but I've met other presidents as well. Probably some of the projects I've worked on, and he just happened to be the guy I had on my computer. So, I also got to have, and this is sort of like the like childhood dream, is I got to end up on the Wheaties box. A little secret, I had actually never had Wheaties before they told me I was going to be on the Wheaties box. I think this is a common thing to a lot of the younger athletes who get to be on the Wheaties box. So I quick fast went to the Olympic Village, and they had, I don't know how old this box was, but if that's indicative of like what Wheaties are actually like, I can see why they have to sell a lot of athletes on covers. They don't pay me anymore, so I can say that. Hopefully this video doesn't end up on the Wheaties homepage. Before I start though, you've got all these, I've listed all these awards and these medals, and maybe you've seen the Olympics, and maybe you think of Olympians as springing full grown as some sort of otherworldly people. They do these amazing things on the field of play, in the track, or on the ice, or in gymnastics, or in the pool. And sometimes when you meet people, you think that you're always sort of destined for that moment. So, yes, I actually got to pull this off, which is funny, but I just want you to know, take everything I'm about to say with a grain of salt, because you're about to take advice from this guy. Who grew up rollerblading and roller skating in North Carolina. If any of you have ever been to North Carolina, you will know if we put wheels on it, we will race it. So I felt very comfortable from an early age with wheels on. Now, I think the thing that, when we talk about the Olympics, the thing that everyone first sort of understands is it's a lot of training. And I think people sort of have a vision for what that means. You think, oh, you got to work really hard, you got to put a lot of hours in, and it's a full-time job. But because you only see us every 4 years, you kind of think we just pop up, we go to the Olympics, we win. Because again, you don't usually see the people who don't win. I don't know if you noticed that, but usually every team has a lot more people on it than the ones who you see winning medals. And so you'll meet people, and sometimes they'll ask you, like, oh man, that's so cool, you're on the Olympic team. It's like, what do you do the other 3.5 years? And the answer is we train for the Olympics. So we're going to start with training, and it'll be pretty brief. This little talk I'm going to have with you guys is going to go like hard left twice, and it's going to feel like it's going off the rails. It might go off the rails. However, there's at least 2 planned hard lefts. So when the story sort of seems to take like this weird left turn, like where is this guy going? It might very well have gone off the rails, but I assure you there is a point that we're going to loop back to. When I was 14 years old, I was the U.S. junior champion for inline skating. I was laying on my mom's living room floor in North Carolina, and I watched the 1994 Olympics. I watched a guy named Dan Jansen win a gold medal, and then I watched a guy named Johan Olafkos from Norway win 3 gold medals. So Dan Jansen, if you remember his name, anybody remember Dan Jansen? Okay. So Dan Jansen was this titan of a man. He was a great Olympic story because he was the guy who was supposed to win every Olympics, and he had this massive tragedy. His sister passed away during the first day of his first games, and he fell. And in long track speed skating, on a 400-year old, that never happens. In the next games, he just underperformed. And in his last games, in '94, in his first race, the 500, which he was expected to win, he had this one little slip, and it cost him the whole race. And the world collectively goes, God, this guy's not going to win. And in his last race of the Olympics, in the last race of his career, 1,000 meters, he goes out there, gun goes off, he skates and not only wins the race that he's never expected to win at this point in his career, he also sets a world record his wife hands his daughter out, his baby daughter named Jane, after his sister passed away. This is like, I still get goosebumps seeing about the story. And I was a 14-year-old rollerblader from North Carolina, laying on my mom's living room floor watching this guy skate. He was massive, tight neck, big legs, and skates. He was such a powerful skater. Just like the ice was blow away from every stroke. And I looked at my mom and said, Mom, I want to do that. And she goes, well, it ain't going to happen here. So at 16, packed my bags and headed out. At 16 is really when I became essentially a professional, although I wouldn't get paid for a lot of years, as a Olympic hopeful, somebody who was training for the Olympic Games. So I don't know, how are you guys' knees? Are they all pretty good? No? All right, I'll tell you what then. I'll excuse you. If you've got bad knees, you're excused from this. But for everybody who doesn't have bad knees, stand up a second. Yeah. Don't fake it either. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Speed skating 101. Now, when you see us out there skating, right, we're like in this weird tough position. It's like we're sitting in a chair, but there's no chair. So what we're doing is, unlike running, where you run, you push up one leg, you try and stay in the air as long as possible. In skating, you're trying to apply as much power against the ice for as long as possible. And the more you can do that, the faster you can accelerate. So to do that, you have to be very comfortable sitting like you're in this really weird position. So if you wouldn't mind, we're going to sit. We're going to squat like we're sitting in a chair. The key is you can't let your tush touch the chair, okay? So we're sitting. And the goal is to keep this parallel to the ground if possible. So you want your thigh to be parallel to the ground. Now, speed skating, of course, you'll notice, if you've ever seen it, we're not on two legs, we're only on one leg at a time. So shift over to one leg. And now here's the real key. Notice some of you guys are in your chair. So the real key is this, and I'm trying to do this without knocking my lav mic off. Speed skating is an explosive sport, so for you to be able to pop off every single push, you need to be able to propel yourself. So we start jumping. I don't see anyone jumping yet. I know you can do this. Oh, fantastic. You guys are great. I'm 90% of you chairs. I'll tell you, I have high school kids do this. They hate me for doing this. They hate doing this. Don't do anything. The point of all this is that you're trying to get very, very good at this very bizarre, unusual physical thing. Nothing about the human body is really made for speed skating, but we figure out a way to become very good at it. In addition to that sort of training, which we call dryland training, and we start the season off April 1, so as soon as we finish the end of the year in March, we have 2-3 weeks off after the end of our season. You can tell, it's not the shit I once was. And then April 15th or so, we start back up training again. So we start that summer for the whole next year's season. And we do that 2 to 3 hours a day. Jumping from leg to leg, having these big elastic cables, putting weights on your back. All so you can get comfortable in this really low position. I tried to figure it out. I think I've skated somewhere in the range of 30,000 to 40,000 miles in my life. I don't know if that's exactly right, but it's pretty close. You have all of the other training that goes along with it. 2,500 miles a year on a bike to build capillary beds. You have to go slow and easy in order to build the sort of infrastructure in your legs to carry the blood so that when you're going for 30 seconds, you can bring as much energy and as much sort of negative, all of the byproducts of metabolism away from your muscles. Then we have a whole team of people. Physiologists, sports psychologists, nutritionists, physical therapists, all there focusing on us so we can do this thing we want to do. In fact, it's an enormously selfish pursuit. So, when you see athletes standing at the Olympics, there's obviously very much a strong sense of pride in your country. And certainly, I had enormous support from my country in order to get there. But the reason I was doing this was because I wanted to win. And I haven't found too many athletes who didn't feel that way. And not only did I want to win, everyone in my life, orbiting around me, was essentially organizing their lives so that I could win. My coaches got up every day and said, how do I coach the best I can so that Joey can be the best on the ice, so Joey's teammates can be the best? My trainers, my sports psychologist, I know it seems tough, the mental rock I am up here, but we had a whole army of sports psychologists. My parents, my family, the sacrifices they all made, all of it is focused on me. entire country is also sort of funneled into these high-performance things. There's this company out in Oregon. You may have heard of them. They make tennis shoes. They've got the little thing. They don't pay me anymore either, so I didn't mention their name. But before the '02 Olympics, they started building these suits for us. And a team literally of rocket scientists and engineers worked at wind tunnels in Washington and Texas with a group of athletes to create these, each one custom made for us, at a cost of something around $15,000 a piece. Now, they don't cost that in production, obviously, but there's only how many speed skating skins to be selling. So the cost of investment per suit is something like that. I don't know if you've noticed, but how much of this there is and how much of me there is. So when you watch us out there, I can tell you, like, any sense of shame is quickly erased when you're standing in front of a million people. It's essentially painted on. Another interesting side note, this is constructed, and again, it was built in these wind tunnels, so that it only fits when I'm in this position. So when I'm down here, tucked under, you can kind of even see the arc of it. It's the only way it fits. So when we stand up, everything about this thing now shrinks, which is why you can see us take our hoods off as soon as we're done. It's not just that we want our hair to flow in the wind, it's also because it's incredibly uncomfortable to stand up forward in these things. There's this enormous investment. All of this effort, all of this energy, all this time put into us being really, really good at skating past the circles. So why such a big investment? I grabbed this. This is pretty typical. This is results from this year's World Cup. If you look at the top, I'm actually very happy to say, not that I wish evil on him, but that particular athlete was just caught for his second time doping, so he's now out for life. So I consider that result doesn't really count anymore. I think that one might stand. But what I really want to show you is this. Second place through 19th place, these are the best skaters in the world. The difference between, in this case, since everyone bumps up in first place and 18th, is 35/100ths of a second. So the really crazy thing in my mind about Olympic competition is not so much that people spend their whole lives training for this, and that we travel around the world doing this, and that when you win, all of a sudden the entire world gets to watch you for a few minutes. It's that every single country, all around the world, every one of them is pouring the same efforts and the same energies into their hometown heroes. Every one of their parents got up at 4 a.m. to drive them to the rinks. Every one of them spent money they didn't spend on the furniture so they could get them to skate practice, get them new wheels, get them new blades. So there was, holes in the couch. Sorry, Mom. And across the entire world, we're all focused on doing this. We all spend 10, 15 years of our life training 7 hours a day, 6 days a week, 11 months a year, and somehow we still end up back at the Olympics, and 20 of us finish within 0.3 of a second. So the reason we put that much effort into it is because you never know what that tiny factor is, that tiny fraction that will make the difference between you standing on the podium or someone else. And at these margins, it starts seeming so small. I mean, we could do it if we did try to do 0.2 of a second on a stopwatch, right? So stop. 0.2 of a second, not everyone in the world is done in that event. It starts to look like, is all the work just the prerequisite? You do the work, you get there, and then you roll the dice? Is it someone was fated or destined to win? What is the differentiating factor? But it's a grinding life. In 2002, or in the years leading up to 2002, we were preparing for my first Olympics. And although this particular conversation is about leadership, a lot of the talk that I'm going to be talking about is more personal, sort of personal excellence. I think that ultimately, you can't control much outside of your own sphere of influence. And I think even when we're at our best, we're not even that good at controlling within our own sphere of influence. And I think as an Olympic athlete, this is a great stage in which you can really test this. But we're getting ready for the 2002 Olympics. And in the years leading up to the Games, it's pretty rare that we have one in the U.S. It's every 20 or 30 years, or thereabouts, depends. And there was a huge push by the U.S. Olympic Committee to make this our most successful Winter Games ever. So this is enormous investment. Financially, the amount of resources we had, everyone knew that we were all coming back to the US. And all of a sudden, speed skating, which is a very large sport in many European countries, but a very small one here, we were kind of flush with resources. And we were flush with expectations. And I was 17 or 18 years old when I first made the national team, and I was officially the absolute worst guy on the entire national team. But I was determined to be better than the worst guy. And my whole life, I'd sort of had this self-image of me being like the skinny rollerblader from North Carolina. And I'm in this sport full of like these titan giants from Norway and from Germany and from Russia and from all across the world, where it's cold generally. And all I wanted to do was win medals. Actually, it's really literally all I care about. I'm going to win a medal. I'm going to win a medal. You'd be amazed how many Olympians, when you meet them, especially the younger ones, who are not so much hoping to win in order that they can have some sort of great... They're not looking for the thrill of victory. They hate losing. It's actually pretty common with a lot of athletes. Like, you hate losing more than you like winning. Like, winning's all right, but what I really hate is when I lose. And this was like the essence of who I was as a kid. The skinny sort of chip on the shoulder, like, I'm going to show them. I'm going to go out there. I didn't really know who I was showing. I'm guessing it was probably that girl in middle school, like football player, not a speed skater. But that was sort of the motive. And I had a teammate, a guy named Casey Boudier. Have any of you guys ever heard of Casey Boudier? I didn't think so. In the last, since 2002, so 14-ish years, is that right? 14 years? What? I'm just quick now. In the last 14 years, more than half of every speed skating Olympic team is made up of former inline speed skaters. Casey Boudier was the first ever inline speed skater to switch over from inlines. If you remember in the 90s, like inlining, rollerblading was huge. Rollerblading company was selling 10 million pairs a year, and some fraction of that, let's say 2-3%, really like racing. So you had tens of thousands of racers across the US, and so we had this massive talent pool. In fact, it's much larger than the number of people who ice speed skate. So for the last 15, 16 years, more than half of every Olympic team, more than half of every medal won by US speed skating is a former inline skater. Casey Boudier, who's now 44 years old, just qualified for his 22nd World Cup team in speed skating. He's been on 5 Olympic teams. No one would know him outside of our sport. But within our sport, if he hadn't happened, more than half of speed skating's medals, and we win a ton of medals in the Winter Olympics, it would have made a massive difference in the medal tallies of the US Olympic team in the Winter Olympics. So I'm not surprised you haven't heard of him because he's never won a medal. I don't know if he's going to finish higher than 15th place in the Olympics, but he was essential to us becoming the team that we have been for a lot of years. So Casey pulled me aside, and he's a really rough dude. And I was the sort of all piss and vinegar and hungry, whatever, skinny kid trying to prove something. And he pulled me aside and he goes, Joey, if you want to be successful with this, you're going to have to be a leader. You have to be a leader of your other teammates, you have to be a leader of these guys. And at the point, I just didn't have a clue what he's talking about. Like, who on earth is going to follow me? Alaska, the team, and at that point, no one on earth would have said I would be destined to win a medal, much less a gold medal, much less a gold medal in 500. And so I just thought it was kind of crazy that he would say this. And it took me years and years, and I still don't know that I fully became that, but it took me years to really grasp his point. But as we're preparing for this Olympics, he tells me this, and it's sort of rattling in the back of my head. But we have these 2 principles that we live by, our coach has set out for us. The first is we say, every day is the Olympic Games. The neat trick about that is when you train every day and you think to yourself, like, all right, if this was my time on the line at the Olympic Games, what am I going to do? How am I going to train? If you treat it as if it's the most important thing you will ever do in your life, you will respond training-wise differently than you would if you just go, I got to get through the day and I'll figure it out tomorrow what I need to do. The other neat trick is when you get to the Olympics, after you spent 10 years, 8 years doing this, you can go, all right, from every day is the Olympic Games, you go, the Olympic Games just like every other day. So it's this neat psychological trick that we had, so that you were preparing every day, so that when you got there, you didn't have to worry about the other stuff. And the other thing is a tip from my coach to me, who ended up becoming very instrumental, but he said, always stay inside. And essentially is, you're focusing on what you can control. Don't worry about your friends, don't worry about the weather, don't worry about your blades, don't worry about your skin suits, don't worry about any of that stuff. Because ultimately, if you can't control it and you spend time thinking about it, you're not thinking about the stuff you can't control. So these are the roots. But this was actually an incredibly miserable way to live. In 2001, I was getting ready for the O2 Olympics. My first games ever, I was 21 years old, turning 22. I became that year. I won the Olympic trials, the 500, the 1,000, 1,500 meters. So I was one of the most successful U.S. speed skater since Eric. No one's like that guy. If you guys remember him, he won 5 gold medals in Olympics. And all of a sudden, 21 or 22, I got to be on the cover of like USA Today. So after I won the trials, it's like a picture of me winning. Like, how did this happen? It all came together. I did media, and at the time, we were all living in one house. So everyone who makes a national team, you get all these resources from the U.S. Olympic Committee and then from your sport. And so we're living in this house in Park City. We all moved to Park City because we were living there for the Olympics. It's at 8,000 feet because we found if you sleep overnight at 8,000 or higher, you get a higher red blood cell response. And then when you go down to 5,000 feet to train in Salt Lake City, you've got a bigger red blood cell. So it's like a way to increase your red blood cell count without using blood doping, without using any of the sort of agents that cause increase in development of red blood cells. And we were living in this house that was like the super skinny row house, like you see in San Francisco or something, up on Main Street of Park City. And everyone who made the team, the 4 other guys who made the team, 5 of us competing for the spot, we lived in one house. And your place in the house, which was vertical, was all dependent on your rank in the world the year before. And so I got to move up to like the top group. So for the first time in my life, I went from being the sort of skinny underdog, I'll show them kind of guy, to the guy who literally lives at the top of the house. And all of my teammates want to knock me off. And I would love to say I handled it gracefully, and I'd love to say that I was focused on what I needed to do and the challenges I faced, but I was a disaster. It was by far and away the worst mental year of my entire life. I couldn't sleep at night. I don't know if you've ever had insomnia before. It was the first time I ever had insomnia where you lay in bed and you're just like, your eyes feel like they got sandpaper on the backside of it. All I could think about was, oh God, if I don't go faster tomorrow than I went yesterday, which was faster than I went the day before, which is faster than I'd ever gone in my entire life. If I don't do that, then what am I doing? Like your self-worth as a human being became wrapped up in whether or not I skated fast in the circle. And we had a teammate. We had this gallows humor. We used to joke about it. If we had a bad practice, we'd come back and, whenever groups are hanging out together, they start creating their own vernacular. It gets really weird. And we'd joke, and he had missed the 98 team, which was in Nagano, Japan, so he used to go, suck the training, suck the practice, no gano. He'd go to Nagano and say, no gano. And then we'd say, that was practice, terrible. Don't deserve food. Don't deserve food. Look at this house we have. Don't deserve house. No. And it was like this weird clipped language. But we said that to sort of take off some of the pressure, because we really felt like if we weren't performing that day, then we had somehow let ourselves down, we let our family down, we let all the people around us down. I had not won, at this point, any medal at the international level. Never won Junior Worlds, never won a World Cup, never won World Championships. But it was the highest ranked of that particular group going into this games. So, opening ceremony start. I'm sure you remember this was a few months, it was a few months after 9/11. So there's the added charge of like uncertainty in the world and just the crazy attitude and atmosphere surrounding that games. And I marched in the opening ceremony. It's this amazing experience. And I still remember the feeling. It still feels like your nerves are on fire because you spent your whole life training for this moment, and then it happens. And I was in 3 races, 500,000, 1,500. All 3 races, the sum total of my competition is less than 4 minutes. 10 years of training for less than 4 minutes of racing. And the difference between first, second, and third is usually 2 300ths of a second. Between first and 20 is 3/10. So I get to the Olympics, have an OK 500. If I'd skated the same time as trials, I would have won another medal. Skate 1,000 meters, which at the time was my best race. Go out there, have a fantastic race. And I win a bronze medal. So if you're going to start winning international medals, the Olympics is a hell of a place to do it. I would recommend that. But I win the bronze medal, and all of a sudden, all the media in the world wants to talk to you, and everyone around you wants to speak with you, and it's the coolest feeling because all of this time I've been spending doing this, looking for some sort of validation. And if I'm good at this, then whatever hole I have I'm trying to fill up will be filled up. I get this, and it's fantastic for about a week, and then it's done. How many Olympians do you guys remember? Probably a couple, right? Phelps. Oh no, maybe. If you're a little bit older, maybe remember Mark Spitz. I'm in this world all the time, right? So I struggle, right? This is the briefest, hottest spotlight you can hunt. On one day, you're literally a hero of the country, and a few days later, it's gone. Now, I don't fault this, and I don't actually think it's that bad. I don't think this is a negative thing. I love the sport that I did, but I know it's this kind of weird thing. It doesn't really affect people's lives. But every 4 years, people will tune in and they'll say, I want to see this kid who I've never seen before go out there and spend his entire life or her entire life and see what they can do on this day, to see if they can be better than you. But I left this one with a very different experience. It's a pretty cool thing to win Olympic medal. And in the great scheme of things, it is really doesn't matter at all. A few weeks afterwards, I looked back and I was like, well, I won this medal, but so what? You don't see that on the NBC montages, right? You don't see people going, yeah, so what? But the truth is, if I had won it, someone else would have. And then that person would have been as glorified in their country for a little while. It's a great personal accomplishment. It is a great accomplishment that I'm happy to share with my family because they spent so many years sacrificing. And the people who sacrificed for me. And my country supported me. It's just not that big a deal. So I made a decision at that point. I'm going to do this for two reasons. I'm going to do it because I love doing it, or I won't do it at all. And then secondly, hopefully, if I'm going to keep doing this, I'm going to try and find something to make this a little more meaningful than just skating in circles over and over. Because it's really just not, it's not worth it if you don't like doing this. There's very few jobs. I would say most people in this room, it's rare that I speak to people who have jobs that are actually worthwhile if you don't love doing it. I think you guys, many of you do jobs that are phenomenally worthwhile. In fact, the joke I would say, it's not like we're curing cancer, right? It's not like we're saving people's lives. I usually speak to a lot of like investment bankers or pharmacists. And let me tell you, their jobs, not pharmacists, excuse me, like pharmacy salespeople. And let me tell you, their jobs are replaceable, those guys. We can do with fewer of them. And speed skating is sort of the same. All right, first left turn. Keep that in mind though. I'm going to talk just briefly because I've only got like 45 minutes and I'm down to about 20 probably or thereabouts. But I want to talk to you about excellence. And it specifically as applies to athletics, but now that I've been through a couple other fields, academics, and now I'm entering into, I've started a company. So I'm like Bambi on ice in this world. But I'm starting to realize that a lot of the traits are very similar. And it all boils down to just a couple of things. So I'm going to kind of go a little bit quick through it. But just briefly, if you've ever thought about sports, did any of you guys grow up playing sports in any level? Recreational? Okay. Competitive? High school? College? Handful? Okay. I separate mentally sports into sort of a spectrum. If you've got on the left golf or shooting, this is an incredibly technical sport. You can have somebody who's in great shape who can't hit a ball 20 feet or hooks it into the rough every time anytime he steps up to the tee. Also, you have somebody who knows how to play golf. It doesn't matter who they are. They can whack the heck out of that thing and send it. On the other hand is something that's almost purely physiological, right? So running. You can train what you have, but if you don't have it in running, there is technique, but it has much less to do with how fast you'll go or for how long you can go than the physiological part, which is a combination of genetics and training. And that's true for most sports. But speed skating, swimming, sports like these, we fall somewhere in the middle. If you're not in good shape, you won't win. But if you're not technically incredibly proficient, you won't win. As far as your training goes, there's just not much you can do about it, right? So you only have 7 hours a day. Most elite athletes, if you find out how much they train, it rarely is more than 7. The reason is there's a diminishing return. So you train for 6 hours, that extra hour might get you a tiny fraction more, but if you train for 7.5, you're now moving backwards. You're causing more damage than your body can recover from. So you reach a physiological point. You can't train any more hours. So how do you maximize that? You only have the talent that God or fate or whatever gave you. So how do you maximize that? So this is only important as a background. Does anyone play golf in here? Oh, I love it. There's fewer and fewer people who play golf. I hate that game. I'm so bad at it. It's the most miserable game in the world. Golf is notorious for this. If you've ever had a lesson from a golf instructor, they love like the 40 items, right? Like, oh, you got to keep and correct me if I'm wrong. I don't care because I hate the game. But you got to keep your left leg and you shift your weight, and then your head's got to stay down, and you got to head's got to stay down, and you got to start with your hips, and you break through. It's 40 different things, 50 different things, right? One essential element of physical training and about athletics and about sports, especially technical sports, is human brain cannot multitask. No one can, and I swear everyone thinks they can. You think you can write emails while you're watching TV and eating dinner? no one can. Your performance in every study always falls off. In athletics, and speed skating in particular, what this translates to is if you try and think of 40 different technical things, you will do poorly at all. Most people can focus on two things, maybe at once. So if you're working on something, if you're competing in a sport, if you're a swimmer, for example, and you want to think about your reach and your pull, there's two things. Or if you want to think about your head position and your reach, there's two things. If you want to think about your kick or maybe the way you're breathing, two things. That's all you get. Oh, we're going to back up for a second. So it's absolutely true in speed skating. And speed skating, just like anything else, if you want to break it down to component pieces, enormously difficult. Same thing, and forgive me because I don't, for the firemen and firewomen in the building, I don't know your business. But I'm guessing if you were to sit and describe the steps necessary for everything going from the start of getting an alarm to getting to a building to going through the process, and then you enter a building, and all the things that have to happen, I'm guessing there are about 100,000 things that you could write down, and if you try to think of all of them, it's going to be some sort of paralysis. So you start drilling a checklist or something along those lines, I'm guessing. Maybe it's not quite like that. However, same thing. If you were trying to think of all 50 things you're trying to do at once, you're doomed. So that's the first point. You can only focus on 2, maybe 3 things at once. I mean, there's a limit of the human brain. Now, I showed you this picture earlier. That handsome kid with the face for radio is me. Face for radio? No? All right. So look at this. Have you ever noticed anyone that you love, if you see them walking, if you don't see their face, you still know it's them? Anyone notice that? Or if you play sports, and you watch somebody playing a sport that you love and you watch a lot, without seeing their face, you can recognize what they do. You can recognize that person from this sort of shape. So if you look at this picture that I showed you earlier, and then look at this picture. So I'd been on skates less than a year at this point. And at this point, I was 26 and I was about 28. When I first saw this, I'd been giving this sort of a talk about this element of human performance for a while, and I found these two pictures, like, holy cow, this is incredible. As you put them side by side, there's a few differences. The arms are a little bit different. But if you watch speed skating, you can see that the shape, and what's most important is there's this line that goes from your chin through here. And then there are these ratios here and here. It's not quite the same angle, but you can sort of, it illustrates it better than I've ever been able to. There is a fundamental shape in me that did not change. And it's crazy. When I was 11 years old, I'd been skating a year. Somehow, whatever this essence of me was already in there. It worked in a positive way and a negative way. I was a very good speed skater from very young, but by the time you get to the Olympics, everybody was a very good at whatever they were at that games. But the interesting thing, and this is the thing that was so crucial, is the technical problems I had. This is a little specific, but the things that I did wrong at 11, athletically, are the exact same things that I had challenges with at 26. If you've ever read Beggar Vance, the book's better than the movie, but they talk about, it's a sort of mystical thing, but they talk about like the shape of a human being, the shape of a person. And I find it most easy to recognize in athletics. But I found in my life, in every other avenue, the things that I did right and wrong at the time I was 11, 12, 13, 14 are still the things that I struggle with today. I was a great student in terms of academics, but I was a miserable homework doer. I was the worst procrastinator in the world. I'm still to this day the worst procrastinator in the world, and so I had to build in systems to sort of correct this. The things that I did well, I was always fairly full of myself, obviously. But I love speaking with groups, and it's still to this day, it sort of comes easy, and there's other things that have always been incredibly difficult for me. And it's weird, because I can't believe that we're just sort of built the way we're built, and then we're that way forever. I think we have some sort of input in it. And so what I discovered that worked really well is I found positive, measurable solutions to what I did wrong. So I'll briefly show you one of them. I don't have much time. But if you look at this picture, I'll back up a few seconds. Here. In sports, you have to stay relaxed. If you ever see anybody who's about to explode, it's the most glorious thing in the world because you're probably getting ready to beat them. You see them standing on the line, they start freaking out, you see them like tense up, everything starts going like this. But if you watch the best athletes, you watch Jordan, you watch Woods, Tiger Woods, and he was playing well, and you watch track and field athletes in slow motion, they're the best at it. It's like they're a cat. Everything is relaxed. You watch a track runner, his face, her face, when they're running in slow motion, it looks like made out of Play-Doh. Now the reason is because if you've got muscles, everything's grouped in twos. If you've got one muscle fighting another, it's going to prevent the other one from working maximally. But one of the most important elements of athletics is you have to stay relaxed. And here's an interesting tip for speed skating. If your back is flat, you're not relaxed. So if you're like this, you're tense, everything's tight, then you're not relaxed. And what I found was if I told myself, keep my back round back, round back, round back, round back, round back. You cannot be tense and keep it round back. I cannot be tense and keep it round back. So, for 6 years, starting in 2000 now, every day I'd write a note card with 3 goals. One of them was round back. And the other two I'm really getting into, but they're similarly based, simple technical goals. And for 6 years, I focused on the exact same things. Every day. Day after day after day. If I did them right, check off. If I didn't, they were bad. When I raced, if I kept my background, one of a few things. If I did that right, then I would win. Or at least I'd be much closer to winning. If I didn't, then I would not win. And so slowly but surely over the course of several years, drilling in this thought that all I have to do is focus on these 1, 2, or 3 things over and over and over again that correct the exact same things that I've been working on since I was 10, 11, 12 years old, would mean that I would be successful or not. And it takes incredible discipline, right? Because every day you think about when you see the big game, the high school coach that gives the great rah-rah speech to the kids, go out there and do this like your last day or whatever. Rarely are people not excited when it's important. Rarely are people like, it's not that big a deal, the big state championship, whatever. It's almost always the other way. It's almost always you're way too overhyped. You're too much of whatever. So these are the 3 for what it's worth. If you want to become one of the champions speed skating, it's the only thing I can tell you that'll work. It's the only thing I guarantee you will work. But these are the most important things. They're measurable, memorable, repeatable. This isn't really performance stuff, but I love this stuff, so it's fun for me to talk about. These are very specific. If it's measurable, you can see if it's right or wrong. Did I do it or not? Binary. If it's memorable, you know to think about it. So when you're out there competing, if it's too complicated in the middle of a process, are you going to think about it? Of course not. It's too complicated. And then finally, it's repeatable. So did you do it yesterday? Yes. You did it before the day before yesterday? No. You do it 3 out of 5 days this week, or 3 out of 7 days this week? Well, that's maybe not enough. You guys know the outcome because you already heard how the battle was won. But there's 2 points I wanted to talk about to make this such a, in my mind, an exemplary theory for athletic performance. The first is, when you're thinking this way, it's the easiest, cleanest solution in the world. If you are only focusing on a positive, not a negative, don't think, don't do this. Think, do this. It's like just very bad. If you're only focusing on the positive correction of whatever your weaknesses are, and again, in my life, I've found it now it works in everything. When I start getting to the point where I'm like putting off things that are important or procrastinating on papers or whatever I was working on, I knew what would work simply and measurably to fix it. And this is the best part. Going into this Olympics, our sports psychologist, same guy who worked with Michael Johnson, and he told me that after the race was over, he's like, yeah, it's crazy. I haven't seen anyone except for Michael Johnson who won 2 gold medals in the 200 and 400 in the 96 Olympics, who seemed as not confident, just comfortable as he did. And I was not that case. I was always a basket case, but going to the Olympics. If you can only think of 2 or 3 things at once, and you know what the 2 or 3 things are to think of, and you know that thinking about anything else is a waste of your time, and you believe it, and you've drilled it for years and years, when you step on the mat at the Olympics, you really don't care what anyone else around you does. It doesn't matter what times anyone else skated, it doesn't matter what sort of weather is going on, or people are watching on TV. All that matters is you go to your line and you go, okay. Starter gives his commands, to mark, set, go. Round back, level hips, round back, level hips. Hit the corner, left in the corner, go, pressure, go. So, it makes everything very easy. The year before the Olympics, I won the World Sprint Championships. I won 5 out of 6 500 meters World Cups going into the Olympics. And it was crazy. My friends were like, what does it matter? He's like, you just don't care about anything. It's not that I didn't care. I was just so, I knew I could only focus on what I focus on. And when people talk about the zone in whatever sport or field it is, I'm convinced that this is some sort of like hint of what that is when you are truly focused in a very relaxed way on the only things that matter. You just don't care about anything else. And if you're focusing on that, your brain just doesn't have the capacity to care. It takes a lot of training. So I'm going to walk you through a race real quick, and this is the second left turn. We're about to get the second left turn. Cool. I blew up the projector. It's fine. It's more dramatic this way. So, I want to talk about what it feels like to race, because in my life, I've still not yet found anything to replace this. And I think that's why a lot of athletes struggle when they're done. But it is the most incredible feeling in the world. I stepped on the line. I'm at the games in 2006, in the men's 500 meters, shortest race we run. I've skated better than I've ever skated, and the announcer announces us, and they say, coming up on the inner lane, representing the United States, the world sprint champion from the United States of America, Joey Cheek. I was crazy, because they're full of Dutch people. And Dutch people love me, and I don't know why, because not every country does, so I'm not bragging about that. I just got lucky. The Dutch love speed skating, and they're there in force. And then that's my opponent. And on the outer lane, representing Canada, 46-time World Cup champion, 6-time World Sprint champion, Jeremy Wilson. The crowd goes crazy. Arr! And I just kind of laughed, because I'm like, man, I just won the World Championships, and there's always a bigger fish. And I laughed, and I relaxed. And I looked on the line. It's my favorite moment in skating. The starter gives the command, and you walk up. It's perfectly quiet. It's like this. And you look down this long sheet of ice. It's 400-meter track. And there's blocks separating lanes. You switch lanes once on the back stretch. It's two skaters and it's all time trials. It's pure. The starter says, do you mark? And in long track, we do this 3-point start, sort of like track and field. Ready? Drive down the line, and I've got the same checklist that I've been doing through my head 6,000 million times. Down, down, down. Build, recover, down back, build, recover. Across the first 100 meters in about 9.67 seconds, which until Usain Bolt did it, was like faster than anybody run 100 meters. And I hit the first corner, and that's when I really accelerated. Go to the first corner, back stretch, last corner, come down the home stretch, and again, same thing. I'm going to do exactly what I need to focus on. And at this point, it's almost like you're on the rails. It just feels so easy. Got up to speed, and now all you can do is not slow down. Cross the line, look at the clock. It says like 35.2 something, which is a few hundredths of seconds slower than Dmitry Dorofeyev, a Russian guy who's the only guy I've been battling with all year. Okay. And I look at the clock again, and I realize at that time that I saw was Jeremy Witherspoon's time. Jeremy was like the Canadian Dave Jansen, except he didn't get it in the end. Sorry. But his time, which was a few hundredths of a second slower than the Russian skaters, put him in 4th, 5th, 6th. My time was 34.82 seconds, and not that that means anything. What's important about that is it's 4/10 of a second faster than second place. In a sport that's usually won by 2 or 3 hundredths, and the difference between first and 20th is 3/10 of a second. Now, on the 500 at the Olympics, we skate twice because you switch lanes. So if you start on the inner, the next one you go on the outer. It's the same distance because we switch on backside, but you have to do both. And at this point, all I have to do is not fall down during the Olympics. And let me tell you what you do not want to be thinking about is not falling down. But I step on the line and I skate again. And again, I was the only skater going for 4 seconds. And I ended up winning the total combined time by 7/10 of a second, which is the most enormous margin. It doesn't happen. My arms fly up. You have this sense of relief. You're just like, oh, God, I cannot believe this actually happened. I pull this off. And then as soon as you're done, they grab you off the ice and they pull you. You don't get your awards right away. Usually it's either that night or the next day you go to the Medal Plaza. They pull you off and they take you to this press conference. And you go and you sit in this room. Let's see if this thing will work here. Okay. So you go and you sit in this room. Well, first they do blood testing. So they do doping control. So they test your blood to make sure you're not cheating. And then they take you to this press conference. And you're sitting at a podium or a table, and sometimes the other skaters are there and sometimes not. And you get to talk to the world's aggregated media. And I got to do this once before as a bronze medalist. So I kind of knew what the gig was, and I knew what the role was going to be. And I'd sort of been planning something for a while when I started skating, because I realized I had this one shot. Left turn, here we go. When I was racing in Torino, I was as far from my boyhood home as some of the most war-torn, savage regions of the world anywhere else. Now, at the time, in 2005, 2006, there was this area in Sudan, Western Sudan, called Darfur, which you probably heard of because it became kind of the calls of celebrities to talk about this. But at the time, the UN and other groups said it was the greatest humanitarian crisis on the planet. And we spend most of our winters competing in Europe. So every time we go to Europe to race, you see these news reports about like these massive humanitarian crises, these people being forced out of their homes and being driven away and gunned down by their own government. And then you come home and you just don't see anything. And I was dumbfounded that something that seemed so big when I was overseas, when I came home, just wasn't there. A lot of Britney Spears at the time, she was going nuts. You guys remember that? Everyone remembers that. And I didn't see any of it. So the first time this happened, I was like, I guess it's not that big a deal. And then you go back over and you see these things again, and you start to realize that my friends who I made from China, from Japan, from Holland, from Germany, from France, from all over the world, these guys that I had sometimes more in common with, skaters from other countries than I had with kids that I went to school with back home. Just by some twist of fate, I ended up where I did. They ended up where they did. And some people ended up in places through no fault of their own, where there's just wholesale destruction. And the dichotomy of this was what was so shocking to me. It's not that I didn't know it. I'm not naive. I know the world's not a pretty or fair place. But when you see it firsthand and you start to travel, then all of a sudden you can't help but think that the world, it certainly doesn't seem just. So these are some of the images, right? And some of these images the U.S. used, because we were really the biggest advocate in an area in which we had no strategic interest to protecting civilians. We used some of these images from some of our spy satellites to help convince the UN to proclaim this a humanitarian crisis. But I was just dumbfounded that I was born in this country, and to this family that supported me, and with all the gifts I've been given, that I could spend my entire life, all of my mental and physical energy, becoming very, very good at this thing. So, I sat in the press conference, and I sat in front of everybody, I said, I know what you guys want to talk about. I know you want to do the rainbows and puppy dog stories. That's why whenever you had every Olympian, hey, how's it feeling to go medal? Oh, it's great. Of course it is. It's amazing. It's real. It's incredible. But that's why we all sound like we're shock idiots. It's not because we are. It's just because you can't believe it just happened. And fortunately, because I won that medal 4 years earlier, I sort of knew this was coming. And I also knew for just one day, you guys are all going to listen to me. So I said, I'm not going to talk about the Olympics. But I said something similar. While I've been training and competing around the world, and as far from my boyhood home as these people in Sudan are from my home. There, but for the grace of God, go I, right? So, what I'm going to do is, I'm donating my Olympic bonus. I got 25 grand for gold. I won silver a couple days later, so 15 grand. So I donated $40,000 from my Olympic bonus to a group called Right to Play. But they worked with civilians in their forth. We ended up raising about $1.5 million from people who've heard about this. I went to all the Olympic sponsors and I said, look, if I can pony up 40 grand, you guys sure can. You're made more than 50 grand in a year in my whole life for being ski skaters. You guys can definitely pony up. And so we got all the sponsors to donate as well. We raised about $1.5 million, but more importantly than that, after the Olympics, Right to Play did a LexisNexis search, which is sort of an aggregate of all news articles that mention your story or whatever. And after this Olympics, 1.5 billion people heard the story. So, in my mind, that's a great investment. $40,000 investment to reach 1.5 billion people to talk about something that is, I think, profoundly worthwhile. And it's not just this, there are millions and millions of other causes that are just as worthwhile. But my leverage was so magnified by the fact that I had this one day. And that's it. You get one day, people pay attention, and it's pretty much over, for the most part. So, remember I told you about Casey Booty, right? He said be a leader. And I still don't think I ever figured it out, because I thought he meant you have to be the sort of charismatic Pied Piper who's so engaging and charming that when people hear you, they just will follow you wherever. And I was like, guys, I don't have that. These guys are not, my teammates are not following me. Like, I'm the last guy on the team, they're not going to, when I would wake up early to go train extra, like they just kind of like shrugged it off and laughed. They're not following me. But what I think you can affect, and I think this goes back to what I was talking about, is I believe there are fundamental principles. And when I've adhered to those principles, in performance, in humanity, and how I treat other people, my life has been markedly better, and the impact I've had on the world has been markedly better. I don't know if I can speak much to leadership, but I do know that fundamental things don't change. And the things that I learned when I was 5, 6, 7 years old in kindergarten, as cliche as it sounds, they're still the things that really matter in my relationships with people, and the way I act, and the way I perform when I'm doing whatever. I can't help the talent I have or don't have. I can't help the environment around me. I can only control these two things. So, Yeah. I can't say anything other than, I guess, the advice that Casey gave me, particularly, like I said, during this audit, is you guys will go out and be leaders, and I know many of you already are. I don't think that means you have to be Olympic champion and you have to donate money to something on the day that you got the media's attention. But I think it means adhering to the excellence that we all already know in our conscious what's right. And when we do that, we're going to do extraordinary things. And I can say for a fact, when I don't do that, they don't go as well. I have one more item for show and tell. So, again, different fields have different rewards. You guys have probably, many of you have the greatest reward. You do something right in your field on your chosen day, and you get to save someone's life, which is unbelievably incredible. For teachers, if they had that great day, maybe it's one kid they never reached. Or for business leaders, maybe they built this sprawling empire that feeds millions of people or supplies things that people need. But in skating, we do this meet every February, we skate fast in circles, and you go fast and anyone else has ever gone, you get one of these. So, this is the gold medal I won in Torino. It's been an incredibly fulfilling personal journey. But even more important than that, it's been amazing that even now, 10 years after I won this, I still get the chance to stand up and talk about things that I really believe in and really passionate about. So, thank you guys so much for having me today. Maybe one more thing before lunch. So, I hope you have a great time with the rest of the conference today. And please, if you have any questions, come chat with me, and I'd love to show you this thing. You can see it up close and ask questions about what the Olympic Village is really like. Thank you.
See the gold medal.
I know where my bread is buttered, don't worry. Yes.
Joey, just real quick, tell us a time when you were ready to give up and something made you not.
Similar, okay, so it's not quite that dramatic, but I will tell you, I've only skipped one practice willingly, where I wasn't injured or sick. And it was in 2002, and I just had a night where I didn't sleep all night long. And at the time, our sports psychologist, that year, our sports psychologist actually had to be institutionalized. He drove our shrink nuts because he couldn't handle it. And at the time, I was on the phone to my family every single day, and I had this day where the next day, 2 days a week, we had something called tempos. So tempos are maximum efforts. They are timed and recorded, and your life history is in these tempos. And we've got them every 2 days for weeks, every two days a week for my entire career. And so it begins to feel like it really, really matters. And tempos the next day, and I laid in bed and I couldn't sleep all night. And I woke up the next morning and I'm like, hands are trembling, and my eyes are bloodshot, and I go, I cannot do this. And I'm sure I said some 4-letter words, I just cannot do this. And I called my coach and I said, I'm sick, I can't make it, I'm not going to make it practice today. And I skipped, and I just couldn't handle the day, the fact that I had to somehow be that great in that day. And I skipped tempo day. It's the only time in 10 years of ice skating that I ever skipped a day. And I called home and I was just like, I might have been crying. It was just a disaster. Like, I can't go through this. I gotta stop. I can't. Not that I want to quit skating. I just couldn't do one more day. That felt like it meant so much. And I think my mom said something like, I don't know exactly what's going on with you. Damn well better figure it out. So not a lot of sympathy. But the point is, at that point, again, my focus was much more, kind of like I spoke about, right, my focus was, I have to win this in order to feel good about myself, right? Like if I'm not skating well, then I don't feel like I've accomplished something. I feel my identity is wrapped up in this. Whereas the difference after all of this happened, and I look back and that isn't worth your identity wrapped up. It's fun. You should do it because you love it. And when I became focused on process, that was the biggest transition, because I don't remember ever having another day. If I had a bad day, and it happened, I could say, well, did I do the things right that I wanted to, that I set out to? And if I didn't, I go, that's probably I had a bad day. I'll try to do better the next day. And it's like psychic armor. So it protected me from the pressure going to the Olympics, but it also protected me from the day-to-day grind. And of course, you still feel it. But that shift in focus from what is my process, what works for me, from if I don't do well at this, I gotta do well at this, I gotta do great at this, was not only the difference in my personal happiness, but a massive difference in my effectiveness as an athlete.
So what are you focusing on now?
Okay, so this is interesting. Well, maybe to me it's interesting, not to everyone else. How many of you guys have kids? How many of you have kids who play sports? Okay, so chances are you probably have either gone and taken some videos, or someone takes the video, you see it, and it's a game or whatever. So I have started a company, and we built an app that allows you to capture video moments and pictures and tag like athletes and results and events for every sport. So that you can essentially, if anyone puts something up on this thing, you can live stream sports and just capture highlights. You can follow any sport that's happening anywhere as long as someone's using this app. The reason I started this was because as a speed skater, I can only watch my own sport on the rare occasions it was on the Olympics, or if I got some feed from Europe, or occasionally NBC Sports would have it. But my teammates were all posting stuff on Facebook, and I was like, this is crazy. I want to see all this stuff. So we built this app that allows you to super easily capture in like one touch and then tag whatever athlete or whatever sport, and it's all categorized. So it's super easy to find, all in one place. So the idea is we're trying to capture all of these moments that are not broadcast. Like I'm not doing pro like NBA, which is well done. It's like every other sport that's happening, and they happen and then they're gone forever. So it's capturing those sorts of moments. From the framework that I use, which is, maybe I base way too much on my current life off what I found success in athletics. So I'm sort of trying to track that, find what things work and what things don't. Speed skating, obviously, incredibly self-centered, whereas leadership, I think of it as like the outcome of your team. So I felt a little bit, forgive me, I felt a little dishonest speaking on leadership, when really what I found that I became very good at was being very good for something I wanted to do, and I didn't necessarily feel like I was creating a team of people who were great at what they were doing. So it seems being a leader is helping other people be great at their stuff so that we're all going in the same direction. And so it's been a big challenge, because my feeling is when I started this was I have to do everything, and it's not perfect. Like I don't like handing stuff off to other people. And also, like I said, I'm not kidding. I wrestle with procrastination, right? Like that manifests itself in. It's very easy to do things that seem important, but don't actually move the ball that you want to accomplish. Actually, that's the most alluring thing for me. I think it's anyone who's ever said I want to start a company and never has. I think the reason is because they find ways to focus on the things that seem like it's getting you closer, but are not the really hard thing that actually gets you closer. And that every day is like that's my challenge as I wake up and I go, did I focus today on the thing that's going to actually get me closer? Or did I do the fluffy, feel-goody, seems like I'm building a company thing? And that's hard, because I'm not yet terribly good at it. I hope that I will